Chapter 9. A Question of Conditioning. The polar star shuddered through the churning waters of the Norwegian Sea, a speck of steel, fleeing the frozen fist of the north. Inside the cramped cabin, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, blood, and the ozone-tinged heat from Kestrel's bank of computers. The stolen data, the Ragnarok protocol, glowed on multiple screens, a digital cancer demanding dissection. Marcus lay on his stomach on a narrow bunk, his world reduced to the rhythmic throb of pain in his back and the hypnotic scroll of code. Sarah had done a clean job with the sutures, but a deep-seated infection, a souvenir from the filthy ice of the airshaft, had taken hold. Fever dreams blurred the line between the hum of the ship's engines and the phantom hum of the mirror-box conditioning suite at Langley. He was slipping. The Svalbard logs, Shaw's words, had been a psychic key, turning a lock deep in his fractured mind. He was my Icarus. The world dissolved into a sensory riot of memory. He wasn't in the trawler. He was in a white, sterile room that smelled of ozone and fear sweat. The bath. Electrodes were fixed to his temples, his chest. A soft helmet, lined with 100 microneedles, descended over his skull. He was young, his body taut with a recruit's eager tension. Richard Shaw's face loomed in his vision, not on a screen, but in person, smiling a fatherly smile that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. "This is where we sculpt the clay, Marcus, where we carve away the superfluous, the doubts, the fears, the attachments. What remains will be pure, will be strong, will be a ghost." The pain wasn't physical, it was an unraveling. It was watching his own memories play on a screen, then feeling them become soft, malleable. The face of his first girlfriend blurred, the grief at his mother's funeral muted into a dull ache. The principles from the philosophy books he'd devoured as a teenager, Kant's categorical imperative, Marcus Aurelius's stoicism, were sanded down into a simple, programmable directive: mission, country, obedience. He felt something harden inside him, a crystalline structure of purpose, and he felt something else break, a connection to the man he'd been. It floated away, a leaf on a dark river. The memory shattered, replaced by another, sharper, more recent. Prague, a safe house that smelled of old books and dust. Rain streaked the window. Elena the astronomer was brewing jasmine tea, her hands steady, but her eyes haunted. She was in her 40s, with a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through cloud cover. "They told me it was for asteroid deflection," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She handed him a cup. "A noble cause. Use focused satellite arrays to nudge planet killers off course. I wrote the targeting algorithms, the harmonic resonance models. It was beautiful work." Then, the specifications changed. The power requirements multiplied by a factor of 1,000. The targeting parameters shifted from deep space celestial bodies to low Earth orbit. I asked why. They told me to stick to the math. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "You're not like the others they send. The handlers. I see it. You listen. The project is called Icarus, Marcus. Why name a shield after a boy who flew too close to the sun and fell?" He had felt a cold dread then, a fissure in the crystalline conditioning. He'd reported her doubts, as was his duty. Shaw's response had been a classified annex. Asset Elena is suffering from stress-induced paranoia. She is attempting to leak project details to a foreign academic journal. She is now a critical security risk. The termination order had followed a week later, but he hadn't carried it out. He'd sent the warning. And then Berlin. The explosion. The jasmine scent replaced by cordite and burning plaster. "Marcus." Sarah's voice was a lifeline, hauling him back to the present. He was on the floor of the cabin, drenched in cold sweat, shaking violently. Kestrel was crouched over him, a worried look on her normally implacable face. Sarah held his shoulders. "You are screaming," Sarah said, her voice tight. "About Elena. About the bath." He sat up, the world tilting. The fever was spiking, but the hallucinations had been more than fever dreams. They were revelations, memories breaking through a dam Shaw had built in his mind. "The conditioning," he gasped, his throat raw. "It wasn't just to make me compliant. It was to make me forget. They didn't just want a tool, they wanted a clean slate. They edited me." Kestrel helped him back to the bunk, propping him up. She brought her laptop over, her fingers flying. The logs from Svalbard, Shaw's journals reference the mirror box's cognitive pruning. He talks about removing the emotional operating system and installing a tactical kernel. It was a full rewrite, but the human brain isn't a hard drive, Marcus. Data doesn't get deleted, it gets buried. Elena wasn't a security risk because she was leaking, Marcus said, the truth finally assembling itself from the shattered pieces. She was a risk because she was a witness. She knew Icarus was an offensive weapon from the start, and she talked to me. She planted a seed of doubt. Shaw couldn't have that. He couldn't have his masterpiece questioning its creator. So he gave the order to burn the evidence, her, and when I refused, he tried to burn me too. The full weight of the betrayal settled on him, colder and heavier than the Arctic ice. It wasn't just a professional disavowal, it was a personal one. Shaw had tried to murder the man he'd created because that man had developed a conscience, the one flaw Shaw's programming couldn't erase. His motivation, which had been a mix of survival, professional outrage, and a vague sense of justice, crystallized into something pure and burning: vengeance. Not just for himself, but for Elena, for the man he might have been if Shaw hadn't carved him into a ghost. He looked at Sarah and Kestrel. We have 17 days. Shaw sees us as a test, a stress test for his new world order. We need to stop being a test. We need to become an error he can't debug. How? Kestrel asked. We have the data, but broadcasting it now would be dismissed as the ravings of fugitives. We need a smoking gun during the act. We need to catch them in the middle of Ragnarok. Sarah stood up, pacing the narrow cabin. The plan is phased. Scylla first, the undersea cables. It's the most deniable. Cause a global financial seizure. Create chaos. That's our window. If we can stop Phase 1 publicly and link it directly to Vance and Shaw, the whole house of cards collapses. They can't proceed to the more overt acts if they're exposed. Marcus nodded, the plan forming through the pain and the lingering fog of memory. We need to find the how. Where is Scylla deployed from? It's not a satellite. It's a sea-based system. Submersible drones, most likely. Kestrel was already on it, her screens filling with data. The Svalbard files list procurement orders, hull sections, pressure vessels, advanced battery systems, all shipped to a Titan division-controlled dry dock in Vladivostok, Russia. Russia. A Titan dry dock in Russia. It made a terrible sense. Plausible deniability. If the sub-drones were ever discovered, they'd be traced to Russian military contractors, fueling the very tensions Odin wanted to exploit. A ship, Marcus said. They'd meet a mothership. A deployment platform. Kestrel cross-referenced. There's a vessel, the MV Prometheus, registered to a Panamanian shell, leased to a Russian geological survey company. It left Vladivostok 8 days ago. Its transponder shows it heading south through the Sea of Japan. Its purported mission is deep-sea mineral research. Its last known course would put it on a vector toward the triple junction of the transatlantic cables in the middle of the North Atlantic. That's it, Sarah breathed. That's the weapon. We have to get on that ship, sabotage Scylla before it can be deployed, and get proof of who's pulling the trigger. Boarding a heavily guarded vessel in the middle of the ocean, finding and disabling a classified weapon system, and capturing evidence, all without being killed or causing an international incident. Marcus pushed himself upright, wincing. The fever still burned, but the new clarity of purpose was a stronger fire. Then that's the mission. We find the Prometheus, we board it, we burn Shaw's opening act before the curtain rises. He looked at Sarah. I need you to go to ground, take the Svalbard data, find a journalist, a legislator, someone with a platform and a death wish. Prep them. If we fail on the Prometheus, you have to get the story out anyway. Sarah shook her head. No. You need backup. Kestrel can handle the data. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm, one of us has to survive to tell the tale. You're not burned as badly as I am. You still have some credibility in the shadows. You can make the contacts. It's the smarter play. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the loyalty to him warring with the operational logic. The soldier in her knew he was right. Where will you go? She finally asked. We need a team, Marcus said. For a maritime assault, we need specialists, people who aren't in Shaw's database. He looked at Kestrel. You said you had acquaintances from your activist days. Kestrel's lips tightened. I know people. They're not soldiers. They're idealists, hacktivists. A few are pirates in the old sense. They fight for causes, not countries. They'll have to do, Marcus said. We need a boat and we need crew who aren't afraid of Titan Division. Can you reach them? I can try. There's a woman, French, ex-Navy diver, drummed out for protesting illegal sonar testing. She runs a rogue marine conservation ship, the Kraken. She hates secretive military operations at sea. She might listen. And there's a Filipino captain, runs supplies to embargoed islands. He has no love for empires. But Marcus, they're not reliable. They have their own codes. So do we, Marcus said. Our code just got an upgrade. It's not about money or country anymore. It's about burning the gods who think they can play with fire. The decision was made. The Polar Star would divert to a remote fjord in the Faroe Islands. Sarah would disembark with a copy of the data and a bag of untraceable cash. She would vanish into the European underground, a sleeper agent waiting for a signal or a tragedy. Marcus and Kestrel would continue south to a prearranged rendezvous point off the coast of Scotland, where Kestrel would attempt to make contact with her network of maritime rogues. That night, as the ship pitched in the swelling sea, Sarah came to Marcus's bunk. He was propped up, trying to focus on satellite imagery of the North Atlantic shipping lanes. "You're not just sending me away because it's tactically sound, are you?" she asked softly. He looked at her. The tough shell was gone. He saw the woman from the Chechnya bunker, the one who feared the scalpel's fate. "No," he admitted. "I'm sending you away because this is my fight, my monster. Shaw made me. He broke Elena. This is between him and the ghost he created. You still have a chance at a life after this, if there is an after." She sat beside him, taking his hand. Her fingers were warm. "There hasn't been a life after for me since I saw you on the Bund. I chose this path when I walked away from my team. This is my fight too, but I understand. Someone has to be the keeper of the truth." She leaned forward, her forehead touching his. It was a gesture of intimacy and solidarity, more profound than a kiss. "Don't you die on that ship, Ghost. You owe me a proper goodbye." He didn't promise. They both knew better. He just nodded. The next morning, in the gray, windswept silence of a Faroese cove, they said their farewells. Sarah stepped onto a rocky shore with a waterproof backpack, turned and gave a final sharp nod, a soldier's farewell. Then she was gone, swallowed by the mist. As the Polar Star turned back to the open sea, Marcus stood at the stern, watching the land vanish. He felt a profound loneliness, deeper than any he'd known in his years as a solitary ghost. But he also felt a terrifying focus. The ghosts of his past, Elena, the man he was before the bath, were no longer haunting him. They were marching with him. They were his army. The conditioning had been a question. What are you without your memories, your morals, your attachments? He now had the answer. You are whatever you choose to rebuild from the wreckage. He chose vengeance. He chose justice. He chose to be the error that crashed Shaw's perfect system. He turned from the stern and walked to the wheelhouse, where Kestrel was plotting their course to the rendezvous. The fever was breaking. The pain in his back was a steady, manageable throb. His mind was clear, scarred but whole. "Set the course," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp of newfound resolve. "We're going to find a Leviathan, and we're going to slay it." The Paladin was gone, the ghost was back, and he was coming for his maker. Chapter 10. The Palace of Ghosts. The rain in Poland was a cold, gray, vertical blanket that soaked through to the bone. It didn't fall, it hung in the air, a permanent clammy shroud over the Silesian countryside. The target was Zamek Chenia, the Castle of Shadows. It wasn't a castle, but a repurposed concrete and barbed wire Stasi prison from the Cold War, sold off to a private security consultancy in the 90s. Now, it was Titan Division's primary black site in Eastern Europe, a palace for ghosts. Marcus stood at the edge of a dripping pine forest, 2 kilometers out, watching the compound through high-powered binoculars. Beside him, Kestrel monitored a suite of electronic sensors. They'd arrived in Poland after a tense 2-week journey. The rendezvous in Scotland had been a success of sorts. Kestrel's contacts had come through. Captain Mateo Tau Reyes, a grizzled Filipino with a face like a friendly fist, and a rust-streaked, fast supply ship called the Isla de Luz. And Elise Durand, the French ex-diver, a woman with the lean muscles of a predator, and eyes that held the deep, quiet anger of the betrayed. They were skeptical, mercenary, but the promise of hitting a big, secret American sea monster, coupled with a substantial down payment from Finch's remaining funds, had secured their services for the Prometheus operation but first, they had to get Sarah back. Intel from Kestrel's deep web sources confirmed it. A female prisoner matching Sarah's description had been transferred to Chechnya 3 days prior, after being captured in Vilnius, trying to contact a dissident journalist. Shaw had his prize, the bait to draw Marcus into a final fatal confrontation. Thermal shows 15 heat signatures, Kestrel whispered, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain on the leaf litter. 10 are static, guards in towers and at the main gate. 5 are moving in a patrol pattern around the inner yard. The prison block is here. She pointed to a screen showing a wireframe model of the site. Central building, 3 floors. Underground level is likely interrogation. Sarah will be there. Marcus studied the model. The prison was a rectangle of despair, a high outer wall with razor wire, an inner courtyard, and the main block. Guard towers at each corner. It was a fortress designed to keep people in, not necessarily to repel a dedicated assault from outside. Its strength was its isolation and its reputation. Security? Marcus asked. Standard motion sensors on the walls, microwave tripwires in the kill zone between the walls. The towers have automated gun mounts, remote-controlled 50 cals. The guards carry assault rifles and have a direct line to a Polish rapid response unit 30 minutes away. If we trip a major alarm, we have half an hour before professional soldiers arrive. We won't trip it, Marcus said. He had spent the last 48 hours not sleeping, but planning, his mind dissecting the problem with the cold precision Shaw had instilled in him. The prison was a system. Every system had a flaw. We'll use their own protocol against them. He explained the plan to Kestrel, Lise, and Tao. It was not an assault, it was an infection. And 0200 hours, in the deepest, wettest part of the night, they moved. Phase 1 was digital. Kestrel, positioned in a van 2 miles away with a powerful directional antenna, launched her attack. She didn't try to hack the main security system. She targeted the prison's mundane, forgotten infrastructure. The municipal water pressure logs, the regional power grid's load balancing software for the district, the backup generator's maintenance schedule. She created a cascade of tiny, plausible anomalies, a slight sustained drop in water pressure to the compound. A flicker in the grid, followed by the auto-start of the backup generator, as per its weekly test cycle, which her malware had rescheduled for this exact moment. To the guards monitoring the screens, it would look like a minor, coincidental series of glitches. Annoying, but not alarming. Phase 2 was physical. While the guards were distracted by the generator rumble and checking their water taps, Marcus and Lise approached the outer wall at its oldest, most crumbling section, near a disused incinerator chimney. The microwave tripwires here were sparse, their coverage map showing a blind spot the size of a man, a flaw in the original installation never corrected. Lise, the climber, went up first, using suction cups and silent cams on the wet concrete. She crested the wall, lay flat, and dropped a rope. Marcus followed. Now came the delicate part. The inner yard was lit by blinding halogen lamps. The patrol of 5 guards was their primary obstacle. Marcus's plan was not to avoid them, but to predict them. Using the timing data Kestrel had gathered, they knew the patrol passed a specific spot near a rusted boiler shed every 17 minutes. For a period of 90 seconds, that spot was in a shadowy blind spot between 2 lamp clusters and out of direct line of sight from the towers. They waited in the icy rain, pressed against the outer wall, until the patrol stomped past, their breaths steaming in the light. As soon as they moved beyond the boiler shed, Marcus and Lise sprinted across the open ground, a 15-second dash of pure exposure. They made it, sliding into the deeper shadows at the base of the prison block itself, their hearts hammering. The back entrance was a steel door, rusted at the hinges. It was locked with a heavy bolt, not an electronic keypad, a testament to the building's age. Lise produced the compact hydraulic jack from her pack, inserted it into the gap between door and frame, and pumped. With a screech of protesting metal, the bolt tore free from the rotting wood. They slipped inside, into a world of peeling green paint, cracked linoleum, and the indelible smell of mildew, sweat, and despair. The prison was a tomb of echoes. Kestrel guided them via a rough blueprint. Down. Stairwell at the end of the hull. 1 guard stationed at the bottom landing. They moved silently. Marcus took point, a ceramic knife in his hand. The guard at the bottom was young, bored, scrolling on his phone. He never saw the shadow that detached from the darkness above the stairs. Marcus dropped, one arm snaking around his throat, the other snapping his neck with a sickening crack. He lowered the body gently. They were in the subterranean level. The air grew colder, damper. The cells were solid steel doors with tiny grilled windows. They checked each one. Empty, empty. Then the third from the end. Marcus looked through the grill. Sarah was on a metal cot, curled in a fetal position. She was still dressed in the clothes she'd worn in the Pharaohs, now filthy and torn. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but she was breathing. And as the light from the hall fell on her, her one good eye snapped open, sharp and aware. She hadn't been broken. She'd been waiting. Marcus picked the ancient lock in 30 seconds. The door swung open. Sarah uncoiled from the cot, moving stiffly, but with purpose. No words were exchanged. She saw Lise, registered the new ally, and gave a curt nod. Marcus handed her the dead guard's sidearm and a spare radio earpiece. "Can you move?" he whispered. "I can run," she hissed back, her voice raspy from disuse or worse. "They've been asking questions. About you, about the data. A man called Shaw was coming tomorrow." They had minutes, not hours. The missing guard would be noticed. "Exfil route is the way we came," Marcus said. "Kestrel, status topside. Patrol is 2 minutes from the boiler shed blind spot. You need to be in position." They moved back down the corridor, past the body of the guard, and up the stairs. As they reached the ground floor, an alarm finally sounded. Not the shrieking assault alarm, but a persistent, worried buzzing. The guard's absence had been noted. "They're doing a roll call. Not a lockdown," Kestrel said. "But they'll find the body soon. Move faster." They burst out of the back door into the rain-swept yard. The halogen lights seemed brighter, more searching. They had to cross the open ground again to reach the boiler shed blind spot before the patrol returned. They ran. Halfway across, a shout erupted from a guard tower. A spotlight lanced down, pinning them. The game was up. Marcus shoved Sarah towards the shed. "Go! Get to the wall!" He turned, raising his weapon, and fired 3 shots at the spotlight. It shattered in a shower of glass and sparks. The darkness returned, deeper now. But the tower's automated gun mount whirred to life, its thermal sight painting them. "Kestrel, the towers!" Marcus yelled. "On it!" From her van, Kestra executed the final phase of the hack. She didn't try to take control. She sent a spoofed command to the prison's security server, mimicking a critical overload. The system's failsafe protocol kicked in, a full, immediate reboot of all automated systems to prevent a cascade failure. Every light in the compound went out. The humming of the electrified fence died. The automated gun mounts powered down with a defeated whine. For 10 seconds, Zamek Semia was plunged into utter blackness and silence, save for the rain and the confused shouts of guards. It was all the time they needed. Marcus, Sarah, and Lise sprinted the last distance to the boiler shed and into the blind spot. They didn't wait for the patrol. They scaled the inner wall using their ropes, dropped into the kill zone, and sprinted for the outer wall. Lise went up first, then hauled Sarah, who was weakening, her adrenaline fading. Marcus followed. As he crested the wall, the prison's backup lights flickered on, and the main security system came back online with a rising siren of rage. Gunfire erupted from the towers, but it was wild, aimed at shadows. They hit the ground on the outside and ran for the tree line, where Tao waited with the engine of a stolen panel van running. They piled in, and Tao slammed the accelerator. The van, lurching onto a muddy forest track, just as the first headlights of the prison's response vehicles appeared at the main gate. They drove in silence for an hour, changing vehicles twice at prearranged caches, before finally stopping at a safe house, a derelict hunter's cabin deep in the woods. Inside, by the light of a single battery lantern, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse onto a dusty cot. Lise, with a field medic's efficiency, began cleaning her wounds and checking for broken ribs. "They wanted the location of the data," Sarah said through gritted teeth, as Lise applied antiseptic to a cut. "They used psychology. Made me think you were already dead, Marcus, that I was the last one, that cooperating was the only way to honor your memory." She managed a weak, pained smile. "I almost believed them, until they mentioned Shaw was coming. I knew then you were still out there, still causing him problems." What did you tell them? Marcus asked, his voice low. I gave them a dead drop in Oslo, a locker that's been empty for years, bought myself a day, maybe two. She looked up at him, her good eye blazing. They're scared, Marcus, not of us, but of the timeline. Ragnarok is a clock, and it's ticking. They can't afford loose ends. Shaw is consolidating power, purging anyone on the Gord who might be hesitant. It's not a committee anymore, it's a dictatorship, him and Vance. Marcus told her about the Prometheus, about Scylla, about the 17-day countdown now reduced to 12. A ship, Sarah breathed. So we stop a war by becoming pirates. Something like that, Tout grunted from the doorway, cleaning his nails with a wicked-looking fishing knife. I like it, better than smuggling antibiotics. Lise finished her work and stood. You have broken ribs, a concussion, you should not be moving for a week. We don't have a week, Sarah said, pushing herself up. I'm in. Marcus looked at her, at the battered but unbroken operative. He saw the same resolve he felt. Shaw had tried to break them both. He had failed, and in failing, he had forged an alliance stronger than any conditioning. Rest tonight, Marcus said. We move at dawn. To the coast. To the Isla de Luz. Then we hunt a leviathan. That night, as Sarah slept fitfully, Marcus sat by the lone window, watching the rain. Kestrel was at her portable station, monitoring signals. Shaw will know it was you, she said quietly. The signature is too clean, a systems hack and a ghost extraction. He'll see your hand in it. Let him, Marcus replied, his gaze on the dark trees. Let him know his ghost is still haunting him, that every time he tries to clean up his mess, I'll be there in the shadows, making a bigger one. He thought of the young guard at the stairs, the life he'd snuffed out without a second thought. A necessary casualty in the calculus of war. Shaw's calculus, the cleaner's calculus. For a moment, he saw the ghost of the man he'd been in the bath. The one who could make that calculation without a flicker of emotion. He was not that man anymore. He felt the weight of the guard's death, a cold stone in his gut. But he also felt the warmth of Sarah's survival, of the fragile alliance in this damp cabin. He was a mosaic now. Pieces of the ghost, pieces of Marcus, pieces of the man Elena had trusted. All fused together by fire and betrayal. He was becoming something Shaw could not predict. A weapon with a conscience, a ghost with a memory. And he was coming for the palace where the new gods lived, not to expose them, to burn it to the ground. The rain continued to fall, washing away their tracks, cleansing nothing. The countdown ticked on, but in a hunter's cabin in a Polish forest, the counteroffensive had begun. Chapter 11. The Prometheus Vector. The Isla de Luz was a symphony of rust, diesel fumes, and defiant pride. A 60-meter former Philippine coastal freighter, her hull was streaked with salt and her superstructure patched with welding scars that gleamed like silver medals. She rolled through the heavy swells of the North Atlantic with the resigned groan of a veteran boxer, heading south-southwest from the Faroe Islands. On the bridge, Captain Tau Reyes spun the massive worn teak wheel with one hand, sipping thick, sweet coffee with the other. He navigated not just by GPS, but by the feel of the sea on his skin, the taste of the wind. The Prometheus, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. A name for a thief of fire. These people have no humility. Marcus stood beside him, his body tuned to the ship's constant motion. His back had healed to a tight, itchy scar. His mind was a crystal-clear weapon, focused on a single point in the vast ocean. Kestrel's last satellite pass put her here. He tapped a point on the digital chart. 500 nautical miles off the coast of Portugal, holding a steady, slow course, right in the middle of the transatlantic cable lanes. She's loitering, Sarah said. She leaned against the chart table, her movements still stiff, but her eyes alert. The bruises had faded to yellow smudges. Waiting for the go order. A ship that size, pretending to be a research vessel, would draw attention if it stopped, so it moves, just enough. Lise Durand entered the bridge, smelling of engine oil and salt. She'd been below, inspecting the Isla's ancient engines and the pair of rigid-hull inflatable boats they'd smuggled aboard. The boats are good, engines are tuned, but a frontal assault on a ship that size, with a crew of at least 30, plus security, she shook her head. It is a suicide mission. We need a Trojan horse. We have one, Marcus said. He'd been working on the plan since Poland. The Prometheus is a platform. It needs supplies. Fuel, food, Even black sites need to eat. Kestrel's been trawling shipping manifests and port logistics. The Prometheus made a covert resupply at a private anchorage in the Azores 9 days ago. The tender that serviced her was a Portuguese-flagged coastal tanker, the Nareda. It's due to make another run in 3 days. Same route, same cargo. Tao's eyes lit with understanding. We intercept the tender, take its place. Exactly, we board the Nareda, subdue its crew, and take their ship. Then we sail it to the rendezvous with the Prometheus. Once we're alongside, transferring cargo, we board. Sarah folded her arms. It's a good plan, but the Prometheus will have protocols, codes. They won't just let an unfamiliar tender hook up. Which is why we need the Nareda's crew alive and cooperative, Marcus said. At least the captain and the radio operator. We convinced them to play along. Lise asked, one eyebrow arched. Finch's remaining funds are persuasive, and the alternative will be made clear. They spent the next 48 hours in a fever of preparation. The Isla de Luz altered course to intercept the Nareda's known shipping lane. Kestrel, from her improvised comms nest in the ship's hold, created flawless forgeries of the Nareda's updated manifests and voyage plans. She also hacked into the tender's satellite comms, learning its schedule and the call signs it used with the Prometheus. Marcus and Lise drilled boarding actions on the Isla's deck, practicing fast roping from a mock helicopter, a winch, onto a moving target, a life raft towed behind the ship. Sarah, despite her injuries, worked on weapon drills and contingency planning. Tao oversaw it all, a skeptical but increasingly invested maestro. On a gray, choppy dawn, the Nareda appeared on the horizon, a low, squat tanker painted a utilitarian blue. The Isla de Luz, running dark and silent, approached from upsun, a hunter closing on its prey. As the ships drew within a mile, Tao launched one of the RHIBs. Marcus, Lise, and Sarah, clad in black wetsuits and tactical gear, huddled in the bouncing boat as its powerful outboard engine roared to life, carving a foaming path through the swell towards the tanker. The boarding was a blur of violence and precision. They used grappling hooks and caving ladders to scale the tanker's low freeboard amidships, coming over the rail like wraiths. The Nareda's crew of 8 was caught completely unaware. Most were asleep, 2 were in the galley. They were subdued with tasers and plastic ties before they could raise an alarm. The captain, a weary Portuguese man named Silva, was brought to his own bridge at gunpoint. Marcus laid out the terms, a significant payment wired to an account of his choosing, and a guarantee of his crew's safety in exchange for his cooperation in delivering them to the Prometheus. If he refused, they would scuttle the Nareda and leave them adrift in a life raft with a broken radio. Silva, looking at the hardened faces of his captors and the piles of cash Marcus produced, chose pragmatism over heroism. The Prometheus, he spat. They are bad people, arrogant. They treat us like dirt. You will kill them? Something like that, Marcus said. They transferred to the Nareda, leaving Tao and 2 of his most trusted crewmen to sail the Isla de Luz to a holding position 50 miles away. Kestrel remained aboard the Isla, their digital lifeline. For the next day, they played their parts. Marcus and Lise became deckhands, keeping out of sight. Sarah, her face hidden by a cap and sunglasses, stayed in the radio room with Silva, learning the nuances of his communications with the mothership. The rendezvous was set for 2200 hours under a moonless sky. As they closed on the Prometheus's coordinates, a massive shape resolved out of the darkness. It was a converted container ship, over 200 meters long. Its superstructure was bristling with strange, geodesic radomes and parabolic antennae. No running lights were visible. It was a black silhouette against a slightly less black sky, a void in the ocean. A chill that had nothing to do with the sea air went down Marcus's spine. This was it, the belly of the beast. A harsh light blinked from the Prometheus's bridge, a signal. Sarah, with Silva coaching her, responded with the correct sequence of flashes from a signal lamp. A voice crackled over the VHF radio on a private channel. Nareda, this is Prometheus Security. Confirm approach vector and cargo code. Silva, with a gun subtly pressed to his ribs by Sarah, keyed the mic. His voice was steady. Prometheus, Nareda. Approach vector 180. Cargo code is Chronos 7. A pause. Acknowledge Nareda. Proceed to starboard side, amidships. Prepare for docking and transfer. Security team will board for inspection. Inspection. That was the wrinkle. Shaw's paranoia ran deep. Understood, Silva said. He looked at Marcus, his face pale. They always send 4 men, armed. We'll be ready, Marcus said. As the narrator nudged closer to the looming black wall of the Prometheus, Marcus and Lizzie took up positions. Marcus hid in a shadowed alcove by the starboard rail, where the inspection team's gangplank would connect. Lizzie was above, on the boat deck, with a clear line of sight. The gangplank extended from the Prometheus with a hydraulic whine, locking onto the narrator's deck with a solid clang. 4 men crossed over. They wore black uniforms without insignia, carried compact assault rifles, and moved with the familiar, unnerving synchronicity of cleaners. Shaw's personal guard. He was here. The lead cleaner approached Captain Silva. Manifest. Silva handed over a tablet. The cleaner scanned it, his eyes flicking around the deck. His gaze passed over Marcus's hiding spot, lingered for a half-second too long. They were made. The cleaner, hand dropped towards his weapon. Breach. Marcus moved. He stepped out of the shadows and fired his suppressed hand K twice, catching the lead cleaner in the chest. At the same instant, Lizzie fired from above, her sniper rifle coughing softly. A second cleaner dropped. The remaining 2 opened fire on full auto, raking the deck. Marcus dove behind a winch assembly, rounds sparking off the steel around him. Silva screamed and ducked behind the console. Sarah burst from the radio room, firing her pistol. She hit one cleaner in the leg, staggering him. Marcus rose and put 2 rounds in his head. The last cleaner turned his fire on Sarah, pinning her in the doorway. Marcus was out of position. Lizzie's angle was blocked by a crane. From the Prometheus, alarms began to blare. More figures appeared at the rail, weapons raised. They were seconds from being cut to pieces. Then, from the darkness of the ocean, a new sound, the deep-throated roar of powerful diesel engines. The Isla de Luz, running with all lights blazing, surged out of the night like an avenging angel, heading straight for the Prometheus's stern at flank speed. Tao's voice came over the radio, wild and triumphant. "Surprise, you arrogant bastards." The distraction was enough. The security team on the Prometheus's rail turned their fire towards the new, larger threat. Marcus used the moment. He sprinted across the open deck, tackling the last cleaner from behind, driving his knife into the man's neck. They abandoned the narrator. Sarah, Marcus, and Lise sprinted across the gangplank onto the Prometheus itself, just as the Isla de Luz rammed the mothership's stern with a grinding, shrieking crash of metal. The impact was colossal, throwing everyone on deck off their feet. The Prometheus shuddered like a wounded animal. They were on, but they were in the heart of the hornet's nest. The ship was crippled, and Shaw was somewhere in the maze of steel and secrets around them. The mission to sabotage Scylla had just become a desperate fight for survival on a sinking ship. The hunt was over. Chapter 12. Boarding Party. The world was a cacophony of screaming metal, blaring alarms, and the deep, protesting groan of the Prometheus's hull. The Isla de Luz's suicidal ramming attack had torn a gaping wound in the mothership's stern, just above the waterline. Seawater roared in, and the massive vessel immediately took on a 5-degree list to port. Marcus picked himself up from the steel deck, his ears ringing. The gangplank they'd crossed on was gone, sheared off, and tumbling into the dark sea between the 2 locked, dying ships. They were committed. There was no retreat. Sarah and Lise scrambled to their feet beside him. They were on a wide cargo deck amidships, cluttered with containerized labs and equipment pods lashed down under tarpaulins. From the towering superstructure above, shouts echoed, and the heavy thump-thump-thump of boots on metal stairs began. "Lise, the watertight doors," Marcus yelled over the din. "We need to seal this deck from the stern flooding and from reinforcements coming down." The Frenchwoman nodded, sprinting for a bulkhead control panel. She yanked it open and began pulling levers. With a series of heavy metallic clangs, massive doors began sliding shut, sealing off the aft sections of the deck. They were creating a manageable kill box, but also trapping themselves. "Sarah, with me. We head up, find the command deck, find Shaw," Marcus ordered. "Lise, secure this level. Find the Scylla deployment bay. It'll be near the stern, below the waterline. Disable it. Use explosives if you have to." Lise hefted her compact assault rifle. "We give them hell." Marcus and Sarah moved towards a staircase leading up into the superstructure. As they reached the base, a three-man security team rounded the corner above. Marcus fired first, a short burst that caught the lead man in the chest. Sarah dropped to a knee and took out the second. The third retreated, shouting into a radio. They climbed, emerging onto a corridor that ran the length of the ship's interior. It was pristine, white-painted, and eerily silent compared to the chaos outside. This was the operational heart. They moved fast, checking door plaques, comms, sensors, armament. The sound of running boots came from both ends of the corridor. They were being flanked. "In here," Sarah hissed, kicking open a door marked Hydrolab. It was a small laboratory filled with tanks of seawater and monitoring equipment for submersibles. They barricaded the door with a heavy lab table. "We're pinned," Sarah said, checking her magazine. "We need to get to the bridge." Marcus's eyes scanned the room. They landed on a large circular hatch in the floor, an access point to the ship's ventilation and utility decks. Not pinned, just rerouted. He pried the hatch open. A blast of warm, oily air hit them. The duct was just large enough to crawl through. "Near the central spine. We can climb up to the bridge levels." They dropped into the duct, pulling the hatch closed behind them. It was a claustrophobic, dark world of thrumming pipes and vibrating metal. Marcus led, crawling on his elbows and knees, following the upward slant of the ducts. They could hear the muffled shouts and movements of the security teams searching for them in the corridors, just inches away through thin bulkheads. After an agonizing 5 minutes of ascent, Marcus found a grill. Peering through, he saw a darkened conference room with a large digital map of the Atlantic on the wall. They were on the command level. He quietly loosened the grill and slipped out, helping Sarah after him. They were in a planning room adjacent to the bridge. Through a soundproofed window, they could see the bridge itself, a high-tech cavern of screens and workstations. And there, standing at the central command console, his back to them, was General Richard Shaw. He was speaking calmly into a headset. "Contain the breach. The aft sections are lost. Scuttle charges are primed. The Scylla deployment is no longer viable. Initiate Protocol Fenrir. I repeat, initiate Fenrir. Purge all project data and prepare the Olympus pod for launch." Olympus pod. A lifeboat. Shaw was cutting his losses and running. Marcus didn't hesitate. He kicked open the door to the bridge. Shaw turned, his face a mask of cold surprise that quickly smoothed into weary recognition. 4 other crew members, technicians, not soldiers, froze at their stations. "Hello, Marcus," Shaw said, as if greeting a tardy student. "I knew you'd make it this far. The ghost always finds a way through the cracks." He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't seem to have one. "It's over, Shaw," Marcus said, his pistol trained on the general's center mass. "Does it?" Shaw smiled. "A thin, cruel thing. Ragnarok was always a contingency. A messy, theatrical one. Vance's idea. I prefer cleaner solutions, like Fenrir." He gestured to a screen. It showed a countdown. 0217. In 2 minutes, every server on this ship, every byte of data linking this operation to Titan or the board, will be wiped by a thermite charge. The Prometheus will be a ghost story, and I will be elsewhere. "You're not going anywhere," Sarah said, her weapon sweeping the room. "Oh, but I am." Shaw's eyes flicked to a red button under a clear plastic cover on the console. "The Olympus pod is directly below us. That button seals the bridge and initiates its launch sequence. You could shoot me, but you'd never reach the button in time to stop it. And if you try, my crew has orders to depressurize the pod bay. You'd be flushed into the Atlantic." Marcus's mind raced. 2 minutes. A standoff. Shaw was counting on his conditioning, on the part of Marcus that was still the ghost, to see the logic of a tactical retreat, to prioritize survival. But that man was gone. "You tried to burn me, Shaw," Marcus said, his voice low and deadly. "You tried to burn her," he nodded towards Sarah. "You murdered Elena for asking questions. You don't get to walk away." "Sentiment," Shaw sneered. "The fatal flaw I could never purge. It makes you weak, Marcus. Predictable." The countdown hit 00130. A sudden, violent shudder rocked the entire ship. A secondary explosion from deep below. Lise, she'd found the Scylla Bay. The lights on the bridge flickered, and several screens went dark. One of the technicians yelped in panic. Shaw's composure cracked for a microsecond. His hand twitched toward the red button. Marcus didn't shoot Shaw. He shot the console. 3 rounds shattered the plastic cover and blew the red button and its circuitry to pieces. Sparks flew. Alarm screamed. Shaw's eyes widened in genuine shock. It was an illogical, destructive, emotional move. The ghost would never have done that. "You're right," Marcus said, advancing. "I am predictable. I predict you die here, with your ship." He lunged. Shaw was older, but he was far from frail. He'd been a field operative once, too. He sidestepped Marcus's charge and drove an elbow into his wounded back. Pain, white and electric, shot through Marcus. He grunted, stumbling. Sarah moved to intervene, but one of the technicians, in a burst of misguided loyalty, tackled her. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Shaw pressed his advantage, raining blows on Marcus, efficient, brutal strikes aimed at nerves and old injuries. This was the cleaner solution. Hand to hand, personal. Marcus blocked, parried, absorbed. He was younger, faster, but Shaw was a master of pain, knowing exactly where to hit. A blow to the kidney made Marcus gasp. A chop to the throat stole his breath. 0045. Through the pain, Marcus saw not Shaw, but the man in the white room, the sculptor, the one who tried to erase him. The rage, held in check for so long, erupted. It wasn't a tactical fury. It was primal, personal. He stopped defending. He took a punch to the face that split his lip. And as Shaw drew back for another, Marcus grabbed his arm, yanked him forward, and headbutted him square on the bridge of the nose. Cartilage crunched. Shaw cried out, staggering back, blood streaming down his face. Marcus didn't let up. He drove a fist into Shaw's solar plexus, doubling him over. Then a knee to the face. Shaw fell to the deck, dazed. Marcus stood over him, breathing heavily. He looked at the countdown. 00015. He could stop it. There had to be an abort, a code. Shaw would know it. He knelt, grabbing Shaw by his blood-soaked collar. The abort code. Now. Shaw looked up at him, his eyes swimming with pain but also with a strange paternal pride. "You finally understand. Power. It's not control. It's the willingness to destroy everything, including yourself, to win." He smiled through broken teeth. "There is no abort." Marcus looked at Sarah. She had subdued the technician, her eyes locked on his. He saw no fear in them, only resolve. He made a decision. He hauled Shaw to his feet and dragged him to the large, reinforced window at the front of the bridge. With a strength born of pure adrenaline, he picked up a heavy metal stool and swung it. The laminated glass crazed but held. He swung again, with everything he had. The window burst outward in a cascade of shards. The roaring wind and the smell of the sea flooded in. Marcus shoved Richard Shaw, the architect of his nightmares, the father of his ghosts, out into the void. The world turned white and orange. The thermite charges ignited simultaneously in the server rooms below. A wave of superheated gas and force rocketed up through the ship's central arteries. The bridge didn't explode, it was consumed. Consoles melted, screens vaporized, the air became a furnace. Marcus grabbed Sarah and pulled her to the floor, behind the solid metal frame of the captain's chair, as a firestorm of incandescent gas billowed through the shattered window and the open doorway. The heat was unbearable. He felt his hair singe, his exposed skin blister. He held Sarah tight, shielding her with his body as the world burned around them. And then, as quickly as it came, the inferno was gone, sucked out into the cold ocean air, leaving behind a scene of apocalyptic ruin. The bridge was a blackened, melted shell. Acrid smoke filled the air. The 2 surviving technicians were dead, crisped at their stations. Coughing, Marcus and Sarah staggered to their feet. They were alive. Burned, battered, but alive. Shaw was gone. The data was gone. The Prometheus was dying around them. "Lees," Sarah croaked. Marcus keyed his radio. "Lees, status." Static, then a faint, pained voice. "The bay is slag. Scylla is confetti. But the blast, I am trapped. Lower deck, starboard side, water is rising." They had to move. The ship was listing more heavily now, groaning like a dying beast. They stumbled from the ruined bridge, descending through smoke-filled corridors, following Lisa's directions. They found her pinned under a fallen beam in a flooded corridor. The water was up to her chest and rising fast. Marcus and Sarah, using their combined strength and a length of pipe as a lever, managed to shift the beam enough for her to pull herself free, her leg badly injured. Supporting her between them, they fought their way back up towards the main deck. The ship was going down by the stern, the angle becoming steeper with every minute. They burst out onto the open deck. The scene was chaos. The Isla de Luz was still wedged into the Prometheus's stern, but was also sinking. Tao and his crew were launching life rafts. The cold North Atlantic glittered under a sky beginning to lighten with dawn. There was no time for the rafts. The deck was becoming a slide into the sea. "The bow!" Marcus yelled. "We jumped from the bow." They scrambled uphill along the tilting deck, past abandoned equipment and bodies, towards the one part of the ship that was still rising clear of the water. As they reached the very tip of the bow, the Prometheus gave a final titanic shudder. The stern vanished beneath the waves, and the bow began its rapid, vertical descent. "Now!" Marcus screamed. The three of them leapt from the railing, out into the open air, as the great black ship slipped beneath the Atlantic behind them with a monstrous, gurgling roar. They hit the icy water. The shock stole the breath from Marcus's lungs. He surfaced, gasping, spinning to find Sarah and Lise. They bobbed nearby, clutching a piece of floating debris. Sirens wailed. Flashing lights approached through the gloom. Coast Guard cutters, alerted by the explosions and the Isla de Luz's Mayday call. As a rescue boat pulled them, shivering and exhausted, from the water, Marcus looked back at the spot where the Prometheus had been. There was nothing but a spreading oil slick and a few pieces of flotsam. Shaw was dead. The Scylla phase was stopped. The immediate threat was over. But as he sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching the sun rise over a calm, indifferent ocean, Marcus knew the war wasn't won. Shaw was a field marshal. The board, Eleanor Vance and the others, were still out there. Their weapon was damaged, but their will was intact, and they had just been shown how dangerous their rogue creation could be. The Paladin had slain a Titan, but the gods of Olympus still sat in their boardrooms, and they would be angry. Chapter 13. The Father of Lies. The safe house was a forgotten lighthouse keeper's cottage on a windswept stretch of the Irish coast, provided by one of Kestrel's deep-cover contacts. It smelled of damp wool, peat smoke, and the relentless salt of the sea. For 3 days, they had licked their wounds there. Marcus's burns were a latticework of angry red welts across his shoulders. Lisa's leg was in a cast, broken in 2 places during her escape from the flooding deck. Sarah moved with the stiffness of deep bruising and cracked ribs. They were a broken company, survivors of a mutual suicide pact with a steel giant. Kestrel had joined them, arriving in a rattling van filled with medical supplies, encrypted laptops, and a grim new set of facts. She'd been monitoring the fallout from the Prometheus's sinking. The official story was a catastrophic accident aboard a privately funded oceanic research vessel. A few conspiracy blogs muttered about strange explosions, but they were lost in the noise. Titan Division had scrubbed the record with terrifying efficiency. Shaw's Fenrir protocol had worked. The digital trail was ash. But Shaw's death created a vacuum, and vacuums in shadowy power structures are not left empty for long. Eleanor Vance, Kestrel said, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her primary laptop. She'd projected a dossier onto the cottage's whitewashed wall. A woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent features, steely gray hair cut in a severe bob, and eyes that held the warmth of a bank vault. With Shaw gone, she's moved fast. She's convened an emergency session of the Titan Advisory Board. Not to mourn, but to consolidate. She's freezing Shaw's assets, absorbing his security apparatus, what's left of the cleaners, and most importantly, she's taken personal control of the Icarus command protocols. She's the new Odin, Sarah said, her voice flat with exhaustion. Worse, Kestrel replied. Shaw was a soldier. He believed in the harsh medicine, the controlled burn. Vance is a banker. She doesn't want to burn the system down and rebuild it. She wants to own the system. Permanently. She's not planning Ragnarok anymore. She's planning a hostile takeover of reality. Marcus leaned forward in his wooden chair, the firelight dancing on his scarred face. How? Kestrel pulled up new files. I've been decrypting fragments from the Svalbard data that survived in my local cache. Shaw's logs hinted at it, but Vance's financials confirm it. She's been diverting funds for years into a project called Panopticon. It's not a weapon, it's a control grid. It uses the Icarus satellite network not to destroy but to dominate, to hijack every communication satellite, every GPS network, every financial transaction backbone. She can create her own reality. If a news network reports something she doesn't like, panopticon can replace the broadcast with her own narrative. If a government moves against her, she can make their missiles target empty ocean. She can crash economies, rewrite history, and no one would ever know it wasn't real. A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the peat fire and the distant boom of the surf. The scale of it was beyond megalomania. It was deification. She needs the master codes, Marcus said. The ones Dragon had. The ones we destroyed in Belgrade. She has them, Kestrel said, her voice dropping. Or a version of them. Shaw kept backups. Not on the Prometheus, in a secure facility. Vance has accessed it. The panopticon activation sequence is in its final testing phase. She's scheduled a live closed-door demonstration for the full board in 72 hours to show them the new product, to secure their investment and their silence forever. Where? Lise asked, from her cot, her voice tight with pain. A place called the Acropolis. It's a private, hardened data center built into a mountain in Switzerland, near Davos. Kestrel managed a grim smile. Of course it is. 72 hours to stop a demonstration that would usher in a silent global dictatorship. We can't assault a mountain, Sarah said. We don't have the men, the weapons. We're barely walking. We don't assault it, Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the fire. We get invited in. They all looked at him. Vance is a CEO. She's about to hold a board meeting to launch the most profitable product in human history. What does every CEO need at a product launch? Sarah's eyes widened. Security. Credible, deniable, off-the-books security. The kind Shaw used to provide. Exactly. With Shaw dead, his network is in disarray. She'll be looking for a replacement. A proven, discreet force. He looked at each of them. We're going to apply for the job. It was a plan of such audacious arrogance that it took a full minute for the implications to sink in. She'll vet us, Kestrel said, thoroughly. We have something she won't expect, Marcus replied. We have the one thing that proves we're the best at what we do. We killed Richard Shaw. We'll offer her our services, and we'll use Shaw's scalp as our resume. They spent the next 2 days building the legend. Kestrel forged a corporate entity, Aegis Solutions, a small, elite private security firm with a fictional history of sensitive asset recovery in global hotspots. Marcus would be the frontman, Kairos. Sarah and Lise would be his operatives. Their cover story was that they were mercenaries who had been hired by a rival of Shaw's to sabotage the Prometheus and eliminate him. A story close enough to the truth to be convincing, but framing it as a business rivalry, not a crusade. Kestrel created a digital trail. Fake contracts, payment flows from ambiguous sources, even staged after-action reports from the Prometheus incident that painted Aegis as ruthless, efficient, and utterly amoral. Then, using a back channel she discovered in Vance's Griffin Partners network, a procurement portal for non-standard consultancy, Kestrel submitted Aegis's proposal for the Acropolis security detail. The proposal included a single, tantalizing piece of verifiable data, the exact frequency and encryption key of Shaw's personal locator beacon, which had stopped transmitting at the exact moment the Prometheus sank. The response came 12 hours later, a terse email. Aegis, your proposal is noted. A meeting has been arranged. Be at the private hangar Zurich Airport, 080 tomorrow. Flight will be provided. Come alone. EV. Alone. A test. Marcus went, dressed in a sleek dark suit, looking every inch the ruthless corporate enforcer. He boarded a private Gulfstream G650. The flight was silent, the cabin crew professionally invisible. They landed at a small airfield in the Alps and were met by a blacked-out Range Rover. The drive wound higher and higher, through tunnels cut into the mountainside, until they arrived at a pair of massive, bronze doors set into the living rock. The Acropolis was not a building. It was a geological feature. The doors slid open silently, and Marcus was led into a cavernous atrium that felt like the lobby of a minimalist, trillion-dollar hotel. The air was cool, filtered, and utterly still. The walls were polished black granite. A single young woman in a gray suit greeted him. Mr. Kairos, Ms. Vance will see you now. Please follow me. She led him to a private elevator that descended for what felt like a full minute. They emerged into a circular observation room with a floor-to-ceiling curved window overlooking the heart of the data center. A vast cathedral-like space filled with row upon row of towering server racks, their lights blinking like a galaxy of cold blue stars. In the center of the room stood Eleanor Vance, She turned as he entered. Up close, she was even more formidable. She radiated a calm, absolute authority. She assessed him with a single sweeping glance that felt like a full-body scan. Kairos, she said, her voice crisp, accentless. An interesting name. The ancient Greek personification of the critical moment, the fleeting opportunity. Do you believe in such moments? I create them, Marcus replied, keeping his voice neutral, his posture confident but not aggressive. So your proposal suggests. She gestured to the window. This is Panopticon, the eye that sees all, the hand that guides all. It represents the end of chaos, the beginning of a rational, managed world. My colleague, General Shaw, believed chaos was a necessary purge, a destructive, messy tool. I believe it is simply inefficient, a bug to be patched. A more elegant solution, Marcus offered.
Precisely. She smiled, a thin movement of her lips. Shaw's death was unfortunate. But also, from a certain perspective, a market correction. His methods were becoming a liability. Your intervention, if your claims are true, was timely. They are true, Marcus said. He reached into his inner jacket pocket slowly, withdrew a small evidence bag, and placed it on a glass table between them. Inside was Shaw's signet ring, a heavy gold piece with an eagle crest, which Marcus had taken from the general's hand as he lay dazed on the bridge. It was smeared with soot and dried blood. Vance looked at the ring, her expression unchanging, but Marcus saw a flicker in her eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or the cold pleasure of a rival eliminated. A convincing token. But tokens can be stolen. I need more than proof of death. I need proof of capability. Of understanding. What do you need to understand? Marcus asked. The flaw, she said, turning back to the window. Every system has one. Shaw's was sentiment. A belief in legacy, in personal creation. It made him attached to tools he should have discarded. She looked at Marcus. You, apparently, have no such attachment. You were hired to break a tool, and you broke it. Cleanly. But to be of use to me, you must understand Panopticon's potential flaw. Tell me, from a security perspective, what is the greatest threat to this system? Marcus let his gaze sweep over the server farm. He was walking a razor's edge. He had to give an answer that was insightful enough to prove his worth, but not so insightful it revealed his true intent. The human element, he said after a moment. The people who built it. The people who know its backdoors. Shaw is gone. But others remain. The engineers. The programmers. Their knowledge is a vulnerability. They could be coerced, corrupted, or become idealistic. The only secure system is one that requires no human interpretation once it's activated. Vance's smile widened, a genuine expression of pleasure. Excellent. You see it. The final patch. The demonstration for the board in 48 hours is not just a showcase. It is the final integration. Once Panopticon is live, its core maintenance will be handled by a self-improving AI. The human architects will be retired. Permanently. Their knowledge will exist only within the machine, where it is safe. She was planning to murder her own creators. The cold-blooded efficiency of it took Marcus's breath away. My need, Vance continued, is for a security detail that understands this transition. That can manage the personnel changeover with discretion during the board meeting. The board members themselves are not a concern, they are investors, they will see only the product's glory. But the technical staff in the lower levels, they may require convincing to enter the retirement phase. Can your team handle such a sensitive, internal matter? Marcus met her gaze. Ms. Vance, we specialize in sensitive, internal matters. We can make problems disappear. Permanently. Good. She picked up Shaw's ring, weighing it in her hand before dropping it into a drawer. Then Aegis Solutions is hired. You will be provided with full schematics, access codes, and dossiers on the 43 technical staff in the sublevels. Your team will report here tomorrow for integration. The board convenes at 2100 hours the day after. The retirement protocol is to be executed at 21:15, coinciding with the live demonstration. A clean handover. Marcus nodded. We'll be ready. He was escorted out, back through the silent granite halls, into the mountain air. As the Range Rover descended the winding road, he didn't feel triumph. He felt a chill deeper than any Arctic wind. They were in. They had the access. They had the plan. But they had just agreed to become the executioners for 43 innocent people to maintain their cover. And in 48 hours, they would have to stop a demonstration that would enslave humanity, from inside the belly of the beast, surrounded by the most powerful and ruthless people on Earth, with a team of wounded rebels. The father of lies was dead. But the mother of monsters was waiting in her mountain, and she had just hired the ghost to be her midwife. The critical moment, Kairos, was upon them. And Marcus had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. Chapter 14, The Last Protocol. The mountain air inside the Acropolis was tomb cold and tasted of ozone and polished stone. Marcus, Sarah, and Lise, now Aegis Solutions, stood in a sterile security anteroom deep within the complex, surrounded by the low hum of the world's most powerful computer. They wore the black tactical uniforms and discreet earpieces Vance's staff had provided. They looked the part. They felt like frauds on death row. Kestrel's voice was a thread of sanity in Marcus's ear, routed through a heavily encrypted channel she'd piggybacked onto the facility's own internal network. I'm in their perimeter system, but the core Panopticon servers are on a completely isolated loop. No wireless, no external ports. It's a digital fortress inside a stone one. You have to get me a physical connection. Understood, Marcus subvocalized, his eyes scanning the schematics displayed on a tablet in his hand. The board meeting was set for the observatory, a circular room at the summit of the inner complex, directly above the primary server vault. The retirement of the 43 technicians was to take place in the sublevels simultaneously. Vance's plan was elegance itself. As the board marveled at Panopticon's power, the only people who could ever turn it off would be quietly eliminated. Sarah, checking the load on her suppressed MP7, met Marcus's gaze. Her eyes asked the silent question, what about the 43? They had spent the previous day reviewing the dossiers. They weren't soldiers or spies. They were engineers, programmers, data architects. Men and women from a dozen countries, lured by vast salaries and the intellectual challenge of building a god. They had no idea they were building their own coffin. Marcus had made a decision. They couldn't save them and stop the demonstration. The retirement protocol was too integrated, trying to warn the technicians would trigger alarms and lock down the entire mountain. They had to prioritize the greater threat. The calculus was Shaw's, but the choice was his own. The cold stone in his gut told him he was becoming the monster he fought. Lise, her movements still stiff from her leg injury, finished her weapon check. We are to take up positions in the sublevel corridors at 2100. The gas, a neurotoxin, odorless, fast-acting, will be released via the ventilation system at 2115. Our job is to ensure no one leaves their workstations before then, and to clean up any who are resistant. We won't be there, Marcus said quietly. Both women looked at him. We have one objective, sever Panopticon's connection to the Icarus satellites. Kestrel believes there's a master control nexus, a final, physical switch that authorizes the satellite handshake. It'll be in the server vault itself, accessible only during the demonstration for manual override purposes. That's our target. We ignore the sublevels. We go straight for the heart. And the 43? Sarah asked, her voice tight. Marcus's face was a mask. If we succeed, the gas might not be released. Vance's whole plan hinges on a successful demo. If Panopticon fails, she loses the board. She may abort the purge. It's their only chance. It was a thin hope, and they all knew it. But it was the only thread of mercy left in the labyrinth. At 20:45 hours, they split from the other Aegis contractors, real mercenaries Vance had hired as a frontline buffer. Marcus, Sarah, and Lise took a service elevator not to the sublevels, but down further, to sublevel 5, primary infrastructure. The elevator doors opened onto a narrow, harshly lit corridor of gray concrete. Pipes and conduits ran along the ceiling. This was the building's cardiovascular system. According to the schematics, a maintenance shaft here led directly into the Panopticon server vault's climate control plenum. They found the shaft access behind a locked grate. Lise picked the lock in 30 seconds. They crawled into a tight, hot space above the ceiling of the vault, the roar of server fans and chillers vibrating through the metal beneath them. Below, through a ventilation grill, they could see the vault. It was smaller than the main server hall but more intense. In the center stood a single, monolithic console of black glass and steel, lit from within by a soft, pulsating blue light. This was the throne. And standing before it, her hands clasped behind her back, was Eleanor Vance. A handful of her most trusted aides flanked her. On a large screen on the wall, a live feed showed the board members taking their seats in the observatory above, sipping champagne, oblivious. Kestrel, we're in position above the vault, Marcus whispered. Do you see the master console? I see it, Kestrel replied, her voice strained. She was watching through a camera feed they'd planted in the corridor outside. The architecture it's a neural lock. It's not a key or a password. It needs a specific brainwave pattern for authorization. A biometric no one can forge. Marcus's blood ran cold. Whose? A new voice, amplified and dripping with contempt, echoed through the vault from hidden speakers. Why, yours, of course, Marcus. Or should I say, Ghost? Vance had turned, looking directly up at their grill. A faint smile played on her lips. On the screen beside her, the live feed from the boardroom was replaced by a crystal-clear image of Marcus, Sarah, and Lise crouched in the duct, taken from a hidden camera within the shaft itself. It was a trap. It had always been a trap. You didn't think I'd hire the man who killed my attack dog without a very, very long leash, did you? Vance said. Shaw's sentiment was his flaw, but he was right about one thing: you are a remarkable instrument. And instruments need to be played by a master. The neural lock is keyed to the unique pattern of your mirror box conditioning. The final, uncorrupted imprint from before you developed conscience. It's the one signature in the universe that can give a final, irreversible, go command to Panopticon. Shaw's greatest creation, used to activate mine. Poetic, isn't it? Marcus felt the walls of the duct close in. Every step, every struggle, had been herded to this precise point. He wasn't the virus in the system. He was the activation key. You have two choices, Vance continued, her voice cool and businesslike. Come down, interface with the console, and initiate the demonstration. In return, I will spare your friends. The technicians. Sarah. The Frenchwoman. They can walk out of this mountain. You have my word. And if I refuse? Marcus's voice echoed in the small space. Then at 21:15, the neurotoxin floods the sublevels. Your friends here die in this duct. And then. I will have my cleaners, the ones who are truly loyal, not Shaw's flawed generation, extract you from that shaft. The process will be unpleasant, and you will still be forced to interface. But everyone you care about will be dead. The choice is one of efficiency, not outcome. On the vault floor, panels slid open in the walls. 6 cleaners stepped out, their movements perfectly synchronized, their weapons trained on the grill. These were different from the ones in Macau and Belgrade. Their eyes were blank screens. They were the final product. No ghosts, no echoes. Just function. Sarah had her weapon up, aimed through the grill. Lise had a grenade in her hand. It was a standoff they could not win. Marcus looked at Sarah. He saw the fear, but also the trust. She would follow his lead, even to death. Lise gave a grim nod. They were with him. He had come to destroy the system. Instead, he was its final component. But Shaw's words from the Prometheus Bridge echoed in his mind: it's the willingness to destroy everything, including yourself, to win. He had that willingness. But his definition of winning had changed. All right, Marcus said, his voice loud and clear. I'll do it. Marcus, no. Sarah hissed. Smart choice, Vance said. Come down. Slowly. Marcus moved to the edge of the grill. He looked back at Sarah, and in that glance, he tried to convey a lifetime of regret and a single, desperate plan. He hoped she saw it. He unclipped the grill and dropped the 8 feet to the vault floor, landing in a crouch. The cleaners didn't move, but their aim never wavered. The console, Vance said, gesturing like a curator showing off a prized exhibit. Marcus walked forward. The monolithic structure hummed with power. At its center was a recessed chair, like a dentist's chair, with a helmet of sensors suspended above it. Sit. The helmet will lower. Think of it as coming home, ghost. Marcus sat. The chair was cold. The helmet descended, encircling his head. He felt the familiar, hated prickle of 100 microneedles against his scalp. Screens lit up around him, displaying streams of complex code and neural waveforms. Initiate the handshake sequence, Vance commanded an aide. Channel gamma through the subject. Marcus felt a jolt, not of pain, but of recognition. It was like hearing a song from a forgotten childhood. The mirror box conditioning, buried deep, stirred awake. His vision swam. He saw the white room. Shaw's face. The sensation of his self being sanded away. On the main screen, a progress bar appeared: Panopticon, satellite handshake initiated. 1%. It's working, Vance breathed, her professional calm cracking for a moment with sheer, avaricious triumph. 5%. 10%. Marcus fought the pull of the conditioning. He wasn't trying to resist it. He was trying to remember. He focused past the programming, into the dark places where Shaw had buried the things he wanted to erase. He searched for the one memory Shaw couldn't touch, because it had been created after the bath. Elena. The jasmine tea. Her voice: why name a shield after a boy who flew too close to the sun? 25%. 40%. The conditioning was a current, trying to sweep him into a blank, obedient state. He used the memory of Elena as an anchor. He held on to the feeling of her trust, the weight of his betrayal, the searing heat of the Berlin explosion. The pain. The human pain. 60%. He was losing. The ghost of the loyal operative was rising, eager to please its master. To complete the mission. He had one last, desperate gamble. Shaw had said the conditioning couldn't be fully patched. That the flaw of conscience was still there. What if the flaw wasn't a bug? What if it was a backdoor? A vulnerability Shaw had left in all his creations, a final failsafe only he could trigger? But Shaw was dead. Unless. Marcus stopped fighting the conditioning. Instead, he embraced it. He let the ghost persona surface fully. He thought like the ghost. He remembered his final, standing order from Shaw, the one given before Berlin: liquidate asset Elena. The order he had refused. In the heart of the machine, he presented that refusal. Not as an act of conscience, but as a system error. A contradiction in the core programming. The ultimate glitch. The neural waveforms on the screen spiked erratically. An alarm chirped. 75%. Handshake unstable. Neural conflict detected. What's happening? Vance snapped. The subject's pattern is inconsistent. There's a feedback loop in the conditioning module. It's causing a recursive error in the authorization protocol. 85%. System integrity warning. Marcus was deep in the ghost memory now. He was back in the Berlin safe house, the rain, the choice. I cannot comply. He fed that moment into the machine, over and over. The refusal. The defiance. The flaw. The Panopticon AI, designed for perfect order, was trying to reconcile an irreconcilable command from its key. It was trying to process a paradox. 95%. Catastrophic logic failure. Containment breach imminent. Abort. Vance screamed. Shut it down. We can't. The subject is locked in. He's feeding the conflict directly into the core. Marcus opened his eyes. He looked straight at Vance, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a smile of utter, terrifying victory. You wanted the ghost, he rasped, his voice amplified through the console. You got him. And he's full of ghosts. He focused every ounce of his will, every shattered memory, every drop of pain and love and rage, and channeled it into the single, contradictory core of his being. I am the weapon that chooses its own target. 100%. The world did not end with a bang. It ended with a whimper. A low, resonant hum filled the vault, climbed to a shriek, and then cut off into absolute silence. Every screen in the vault went black. The pulsating blue light in the console died. The overhead lights flickered and went out, replaced a second later by dim, red emergency lighting. A synthetic voice echoed through the darkness, Panopticon core corrupted. Neural lock irreversibly engaged. Satellite handshake terminated. Initiating cascade purge. A series of deep, metallic clunks reverberated through the mountain as physical breakers disengaged. Then, from the server racks themselves, came the sickening sound of sizzling electronics and the acrid smell of ozone as the AI began to consume its own data in a frenzy of self-destruction. Vance stared, utterly stunned, at the dead console. Her perfect, rational system had been destroyed not by a bomb or a virus, but by an existential paradox. By a soul. Kill him, she whispered. Then she screamed it. Kill him. The cleaners moved. But in the darkness and confusion, Sarah and Lee struck. They dropped from the duct, firing as they fell. Sarah's shots took out 2 cleaners. Lee's, landing badly on her injured leg, still managed to put a burst into a third. Marcus tore the helmet from his head, wires snapping. He rolled from the chair as gunfire shredded it. The vault became a close-quarters nightmare of strobing red light and muzzle flashes. The remaining cleaners were flawless, but Sarah and Marcus knew their patterns. They fought not to win, but to survive, to reach Vance. Marcus saw her, backing towards a sealed emergency exit, a pistol in her hand now. He lunged, tackling her to the cold floor. The pistol skittered away. She fought with a surprising, feral strength, scratching at his burned face. You've ruined everything, she snarled. That was the plan, he grunted, pinning her. A cleaner turned his weapon towards them. Sarah shot him in the back of the head. Silence fell, broken only by the dying sizzle of servers and the moan of the wounded. The cleaners were down. Vance's aides were cowering. The vault was a charnel house. Marcus hauled Vance to her feet. She was disheveled, her steely hair undone, her eyes burning with a hatred hotter than any furnace. The board, she spat. They'll know. They'll come for you. Let them, Marcus said. He looked at the dead console, at the ruined god machine. The neural lock was engaged forever. Panopticon was a brick. The Icarus satellites were silent, waiting for a command that would never come. They had won. But as the sound of distant alarms and shouting echoed down from the boardroom above, Marcus knew the victory was fragile. The mountain was waking up. The board members would be fleeing, calling in favors, covering their tracks. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new, shadowy phase. He looked at Sarah, who was helping Lise to her feet. They were alive. The 43 technicians, he realized with a surge of hope, the gas hadn't been released. The demonstration had failed. They might still be alive. They had to move. They had to disappear. But as he dragged Eleanor Vance, the fallen queen of a dead empire, towards the service elevator, Marcus Thorne felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. Not peace. Not yet. But the faint, tentative glow of a dawn after the longest night. The ghost had flown too close to the sun, and in burning, had set the heavens ablaze. Now, he had to walk out of the ashes. Chapter 15, Ghost in the Machine. The safe house was a farmhouse in the Cevennes region of southern France, a place of stone, silence, and ancient, rolling hills. It belonged to Lisa's great-aunt, a woman who asked no questions and was paid handsomely in cash to spend the summer with her sister in Nice. The air smelled of lavender and dry earth, a world away from the ozone and blood of the Acropolis. For 2 weeks, they had lain low, healing. Kestrel had joined them, her Icelandic pallor slowly warming in the Provençal sun. The news from the outside world was a carefully curated fiction. The tragic landslide that had fortuitously sealed the entrance to the Acropolis data center. The regrettable loss of several prominent business leaders and former officials in the unrelated incident. The tech blogs buzzed with a mysterious, global satellite glitch that had lasted for 17 minutes, exactly the duration of Panopticon's death throes, before services mysteriously restored themselves. The official story was a solar flare. But as the sound of distant alarms and shouting echoed down from the boardroom above, Marcus knew the victory was fragile. The mountain was waking up. The board members would be fleeing, calling in favors, covering their tracks. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new, shadowy phase. He looked at Sarah, who was helping Lise to her feet. They were alive. The 43 technicians, he realized with a surge of hope, the gas hadn't been released. The demonstration had failed. They might still be alive. They had to move. They had to disappear. But as he dragged Eleanor Vance, the fallen queen of a dead empire, towards the service elevator, Marcus Thorne felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. Not peace. Not yet. But the faint, tentative glow of a dawn after the longest night. The ghost had flown too close to the sun, and in burning, had set the heavens ablaze. Now, he had to walk out of the ashes. Chapter 15, Ghost in the Machine. The safe house was a farmhouse in the Cevennes region of southern France, a place of stone, silence, and ancient, rolling hills. It belonged to Lisa's great-aunt, a woman who asked no questions and was paid handsomely in cash to spend the summer with her sister in Nice. The air smelled of lavender and dry earth, a world away from the ozone and blood of the Acropolis. The truth was a ghost in the machine. Eleanor Vance was in a CIA black site, her fate a bargaining chip in a labyrinth of denials and silent agreements. She would never see the light of day, but she would also never face a public court. The world could not know how close it had come to a silent coup. Some truths were too destabilizing. Marcus sat on a stone bench under an old olive tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of peach and violet. The burns on his back were pink, shiny new skin. The deeper scars were hidden. Sarah emerged from the farmhouse, carrying 2 glasses of local red wine. She handed him one and sat beside him. Kestrel got a message. Kestrel got a message, she said quietly. From Finch. He's alive. Lying low in Morocco. He says the item in Damascus can wait. Marcus nodded, sipping the wine. It was rough, honest. And the 43, he asked, the question he'd held in for days. Alive, Sarah said, a real smile touching her lips for the first time in weeks. The gas was never released. When Panopticon crashed, Vance's systems went into total lockdown. Swiss federal police, responding to the landslide, found them confused but unharmed in their dormitories. They're being debriefed by a joint task force. They'll be memory holed, given new identities, pensions. But they're alive. A weight Marcus hadn't fully acknowledged lifted from his chest. He had not sacrificed the innocent. The calculus had been wrong. Mercy, against all odds, had found a way. And us? He asked, looking at her. She met his gaze. The official hunt is over. Shaw is dead. Vance is contained. The board is scattering like cockroaches, selling off assets, donating to charities, trying to buy invisibility. We're not a priority anymore. But we're not clean. We're ghosts with too many stories. We could disappear, Marcus said. New names. A beach somewhere. The money Finch left us is more than enough. Is that what you want? She asked, her eyes searching his. He looked out at the darkening hills. He thought of the beach. Of silence. Of a life without shadows. The temptation was a physical ache. But he also thought of the scattered cockroaches. The men and women who had funded Odin, who had believed in a world they could own. They were still out there. Their ideology wasn't dead, just wounded. And wounded ideologies were dangerous. No, he said finally, the word surprising him with its certainty. It's not what I want. Shaw tried to erase me. Vance tried to use me. They saw me as a tool, a ghost, a key. I'm not any of those things. Not anymore. Then what are you? Sarah's voice was soft. I'm a man who knows where the bodies are buried. And I know there are people still digging graves. He turned to her. The Paladin was a freelance fantasy. The ghost was a lie they told me. But this knowledge, this network, he gestured to the farmhouse, where Kestrel and Lise were arguing good-naturedly over a map. It's real. We have Kestrel, who can find any secret. Lise, who knows the world's hidden passages. Tau, who can sail into any storm. Finch, in the shadows. You. He took her hand. Its warmth was an anchor. We're not agents of a nation. We can't be. But we can be something else. A small, mobile antibody. When the next Odin rises, when the next invisible hand tries to steer the world into the abyss, we'll be there. Not for a flag. For the people in the dark who don't know they're in a cage. Sarah was silent for a long time, watching the last light fade. Then she squeezed his hand. A antibody. I like that. Less pretentious than Paladin. She finished her wine. So where do we start? With a list, Marcus said. Kestrel is already compiling it. The surviving board members. Their enablers. The private security firms that did their wet work. The banks that laundered their money. We don't expose them. We inconvenience them. We steal their secrets and leak them to their rivals. We sabotage their deals. We turn their own systems against them. We make the cost of doing evil business prohibitively high. A guerrilla war against the shadow world, Sarah mused. A clean-up crew, Marcus corrected. For the messes no government can touch. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, cold and bright. The ghosts of Elena, of Shaw, of the man he was before the bath, they were still there. But they were no longer haunting him. They were his counsel. His compass. A week later, they were gone from the farmhouse. It was left clean, empty, with a stack of euros under a vase for Lisa's great-aunt. They traveled separately, through a chain of safe houses and blind drops, to a new base of operations. It wasn't a bunker or a mountain fortress. It was a sleek, anonymous motor yacht, the Wandering Star, purchased through a cascade of shells with Finch's money. It could sail anywhere, its satellite array a mobile listening post, its hold a compact armory and server room. The core was there, Marcus, Sarah, Kestrel. Lise would join when her leg fully healed. Tau was on retainer, his Isla de Luz, repaired and renamed, a sister ship for operations in shallower waters. Finch was their silent partner, their source in the world of artifacts and secrets. Their first target was Alastair Croft, a former British intelligence director turned venture capitalist, and a key financier of Titan's early phase. He was about to close a massive merger that would give him control of a major data mining corporation. Kestrel, from her station on the Wandering Star, spent 3 days infiltrating the merger's digital data room. She didn't steal the plans. She subtly altered them. She inserted clauses that would be catastrophic for Croft, buried in legalese so deep his lawyers missed it. She also found evidence of his insider trading and anonymously fed it to a dogged financial regulator in Hong Kong. The merger went through. 2 weeks later, the hidden clauses were triggered, the stock collapsed, and Croft was served with an international warrant. His empire crumbled not with a bang, but with the dry rustle of falling paper. A predictable, financial death. No bodies. Just consequence. They watched the news on a monitor in the yacht salon, anchored off the coast of Sardinia. Croft's bloated, furious face filled the screen as he was led away by police. One down, Kestrel said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. A lot more to go, Sarah said, but she was smiling. Marcus said nothing. He looked from the screen to the open sea beyond the windows. This was the new war. Fought not with bullets, but with bits and bytes. With whispers and whispers. A war of attrition against the architecture of tyranny. He was no longer the ghost. He was no longer the paladin. He was a man in a room on a boat, with people he trusted, deciding who to haunt next. The system had tried to delete him. He had become an error it could not correct. And now, he would spend the rest of his life introducing errors into other, darker systems. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean, casting a golden path on the water. It looked like freedom. It looked like a road. Sarah came to stand beside him, following his gaze. Penny for your thoughts. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. The contact was no longer strange, but necessary. A point of reality in a fabricated world. I was thinking, he said, his voice quiet, that we're not ghosts anymore. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Then what are we? He watched the last light gleam on the waves, thinking of the silent satellites in the sky above, the hidden cables under the sea, the trillion secret transactions blinking through the dark. We're the thing the ghosts are afraid of. The end.